talked about chokhmah, we talked about binah, and dat. Those are the three aspects of the human intellect, the human mind. Binah, we talked about, is the ability that we have to learn something from something else. That we learn one thing and we can derive new information from what we previously know. That's binah. And binah should lead us, this is where we left off, it should lead us to developing our moral character to be closer to Hashem, closer to God. So far, so good. Now, the intellect. There's a medrash in Tehillim, in Psalms, that says, Orach Chaim, it says, LeDavid Maskil, David HaMelech, Maskil is using his intellectual abilities, Ashrei Nasui Pesha. That is to say, Mi shehu mistakel lemala, whoever looks upward, look above, Maktiv alav, what does it say about him? Orach Chaim lemala maskil. It says that the way of life is looking upward with using the intellect. And it goes through here different examples of individuals in Jewish history that looked up towards the heavens in this medrash. And what does Chazal here intend to teach us? So the rabbis intend to say that the sechel, the intellect, is the ability that we have to look upward. Obviously, we're not talking about the ability to look at the sky. But we're talking about the ability that we have to focus on and go beyond physicality. Okay? And in the instances of our lives that we are able to do that, it means that our intellect is working properly and is pure. Okay? But we have those moments in our lives that we are able to sort of transcend physicality, transcend the physical world, and look at something more important. Those are the times that we are utilizing our intellect the way we're supposed to. Okay. So, now we're going to move to dat. It talks about chokhmah. Chokhmah included two things. One is the recognition of what is real and what is false, right? Truth and falsehood. Second, evaluation, putting value on the things that we see. Then bina is the ability to learn one thing from another and derive new information, which leads us to development of our moral character. And then we get to dat. What's dat? So the rabbis gave us, there's actually two verses in the book of Mishlei, Proverbs. Have you ever read Proverbs? If you haven't read Proverbs, you should really get to work. It's a really great book. I used to read Proverbs on the subway from Queens to the city. And it was like, because I wanted to know those verses better. So I would just read them over and over to just get a beautiful, beautiful proverb. Same thing with Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. It's a very, very powerful things that are mentioned there. So, the psukim are like this. B'chokhma yivne bayit, u'b'tvuna yekonan, u'b'dat chadarim yimal'u, kol hon yakar v'na'im. So if you look at chapter 24, verse 3 and 4, he says, listen to this, through wisdom a house is built, it is established through understanding, and through knowledge its chambers become filled with all dear and pleasant treasures. So we find the three terms in this one verse. We have through wisdom, chokhmah, a house is built. It is established through bina, understanding, and through knowledge, dat, its chambers become filled with all dear and pleasant treasures. Now, if you run to chapter 3, Hashem founded the earth with wisdom. What's wisdom? Chokhmah. He established the heavens with understanding. What's understanding? Bina, right? Through his knowledge, the depths were cleaved and the heavens dripped dew. So we have again 3 terms. Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat. So we see, we're going to keep this open and put it here just in case we need it. So those of you who wondered which chapter of Proverbs you probably know by heart, chapter 31, verse 10 through the rest. Everyone, we sing that every Friday night. So you actually know a chapter from Proverbs. So we have these 2 verses. And what it's telling us is that Dat does 2 things. This Dat, this knowledge that we're going to get, does 2 things. And they seem to be different. Okay? Probably are different. But in this stage, I'm hedging. It seems to be that's different. Dat fills up rooms. So the first verse said, right? Fills up rooms with all sorts of good things. And splits the deep. Right? So it fills up rooms and splits the deeps. Obviously, that's symbolic for something. What is it symbolizing? We're going to get to. But we see that the Dat does 2 separate things that are not necessarily connected. You with me? Okay. So let's try to figure out what we're talking about. So it said, remember, there's an aspect of the human being that builds a house. Chokhmah builds houses. So what does that mean? That since we have the ability to recognize reality and value reality, decide what we like, what we don't like, we put a sign of value to it, that is like building a house. Okay? Because what's a house? It is an entity of a set location in a certain spot, right? With demarcated boundaries, right here. And Bina, what does Bina do? Bina relates, so it's like this. If you think about the Chokhmah and Bina, both of them, they relate to things that are outside the human being. Right? Because the Chokhmah is recognizing reality. Reality is outside of us. Valuating is also, what is it worth to me? But we are all focusing on what is outside of us. And it's as if we are sort of empty. Dat is about filling our inside, right? Filling the rooms with stuff. Like the house is created, right? Bina is creating the rooms, right? Learning one thing from another. And Dat is filling up the room. So what do we fill it up with? So he says Dat are things that we can know ourselves. There's certain things that we know intuitively, that nobody needs to teach us. For example, is there something that you can learn that you know without even thinking about it? That is, what? No, that's an act that you're not doing it consciously. We're talking about conscious things. So the example that the Alei Shur gives, he says we're talking about things that behavior in society. They hit people. Yeah, you know that's not a good thing. Right? Or not only that, but there's proper behavior. You don't walk into other people's homes without permission. I'm a criminal. Okay. Right? You have to always. But normal people, David, right, don't open doors without permission. What do they do first? They knock. And then they open the door. Like, no, you have to wait till somebody says, come in. And then you don't know what come in is. Do you come in or do you? Because it's like you're not sure. Right? There are things that we know that we can figure out without looking at reality. There's sort of these internal principles. in philosophy, in medieval philosophy, it's called first principles. First principle, like the first principle that everybody knows, and you don't have to go to school for this, right? I'm sure you know this in Muncie, that a statement cannot be true and false at the same time. But it is when you make a statement, for example, Ronnie is blue. Okay, and the next statement, Ronnie is not blue. Only one of them could be true. They could both be false, right? Because Ronnie could be green. But let's assume our choices is either blue or not blue. So either Ronnie is blue or he's not blue right now. Okay? Only one of those could be true. They can't be both true at the same time. There are certain things that we should know on our own. And the rabbis say, listen to this. Any Talmid Chacham that doesn't have da'at, that hasn't filled up his rooms himself with things that he should know, is worse than a dead animal. A Talmid Chacham. That's what it says. Kol Talmid Chacham she'en bo da'at, nevela tova mimenu. A dead animal is better than him. It's more useful than him. If you don't have common courtesy, common sense of behavior, that is one aspect of da'at, this filling up the room business. Well, Rabbi, what about splitting the deep? There's two things that da'at does. So the splitting of the deep means it is a great ability that we have to connect the intellect with our moral virtues, to connect the two. That the mind and the heart work together. Sometimes the heart works without the mind. Right? Every story of a boy and a girl is the disconnect between the mind. I knew it was wrong, but my heart says do it. Right? Or it's the other way around. Well, my heart said, but I knew that this was the wrong. People invest money. Right? Well, all the numbers didn't work out exactly, but I felt I had to go for it. Yeah, did you make any money? No, I lost my pants, but I really had a good feeling about it. Yeah? Every story in Las Vegas starts like that. I had this feeling, I know the odds were against me, there was a big sign, but I knew I had the feeling. Question is, do we live in a way that the heart and the mind are connected? If you know what reality is, if you know what the situation is, what truth and what is false, and you know what is moral and what is immoral, what is right and what is wrong, the feeling part, then you should live consistently with both. We know about Bilam. Bilam had the first part of da'at, was able to figure out concepts on his own. He was at the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, but he did not split the deep. He did not connect his knowledge with morality. For him, it had no connection whatsoever. So for us, the whole idea is that the knowledge that we have should help us build our moral character, that we become better and better people. And that's why the Rambam wrote, he has a book, a section of his book called Hilchot Deot, from the word da'at. And he writes there that the Derech HaYeshara, the best path, is the middle between all opinions. Right? There's two extremities, and the idea is to find the middle ground, the balance. Don't be too stingy, right? But don't give up all your money. Have a balance. Rashi told us when we were reading Bereshis in Genesis, right, that God created man from the dust of the earth, and he blew in his nostrils the breath of life. And Adam became Nefesh Chaya, a living soul. Rashi says, animals were also called Nefesh Chaya, living souls, but this one is more alive than the others because there are two things added to it. What are the two things? De'ah, dat, which is what we learned, and dibur, the ability to speak. Since we know De'ah and dibur, we have a greater sense of being alive than animals. Now, obviously, we can argue about that. How do you know? How do you know that you're more alive than a dolphin? How do you know? Maybe you're less alive than a cockroach. But understand the idea in terms of creation here. But the idea is that we have an ability to connect to others on a scale that is unprecedented. Okay? We have an ability to create society, and that the philosophers, particularly Aristotle, right, defined the human being as a social animal, zoon politikon. Right? That's how Aristotle defined us. So, in order for us to build society, God gave us a tool, which is speech. And we use this speech not only to build society, but also to connect to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Correct? Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu speaks to us, so to speak, and we respond, we speak back. And that is a very important part of our relationship to God. It's not just thinking to God, but also articulating our thoughts into words and sending them towards Him.